It's 2026, y'all. A new year, new possibilities, and honestly, a fresh breath of air. For today's episode, I wanted to sit down with you and reflect on 2025. Not as in a highlight reel kind of way, but in a real, grounded, this is what life actually looked like sort of fashion. Because if you've ever reached the end of a year feeling like I didn't do what I said I was going to do this year, but I also know I didn't waste the year, then this episode is for you. I'm going to walk you through why I wasn't consistent with the podcast in 2025, the biggest lessons the year taught me about stress, growth, and capacity, and a simple framework you can use to evaluate your year without shame, pressure, or unrealistic expectations. What do you say? Let's dive into the show. Welcome to More Than a Milspouse, the podcast for military spouses who want to live with more meaning and less overwhelm. I'm your host, Christine, seasoned military spouse, mom of 3, life coach, and your guide to intentionally designing a life you're excited about as a military spouse. I'm here to help you get the clarity you need so you can get unstuck and unlock your purpose and potential. Because you, my friend, are more than a milspouse. You have something valuable to offer. And when you pursue the things that light your heart on fire, you trade frustration for fulfillment and isolation for a life of impact. It's time to discover who you are meant to be, because together we can change the world. Oh my goodness, you guys, I am so glad to be back here recording new episodes for you in 2026. As I mentioned in the intro, 2025 was not my most consistent year of podcasting, and I know that has an impact on the podcast and the overall reach of the podcast. So I would love it if you could help me out by sharing this podcast with your circle of friends, with leaving a review of the show on Apple iTunes, and helping spread the word that this podcast is for military spouses. This is about helping you make the most of the life you have and learn to love your life without losing yourself along the way. So thank you for being a voice for this podcast and for encouraging other military spouses in their journey. So I want to start with this idea. I heard this on the radio the other day. January 9th is unofficially called Quitter's Day. It's the day that most people abandon their New Year's resolutions. And that's exactly why I'm not a huge fan of the term resolutions, because there's this idea that we're going to set this goal and we're going to stick with it all year long. And then the moment that life happens and we forget, or something keeps us from doing what we resolved to do, we feel frustrated. We feel discouraged. And before long, we give up trying to do it at all. So while I'm not a huge fan of the term resolutions, I am a huge fan of annual planning, and even more so, flexible planning that is designed for your life as a military spouse. Because here's the one thing that I want you to know. It doesn't matter if you don't sit down to plan your year until February. It doesn't matter if you don't choose a word for your year until March, or if you pivot halfway through the year. What matters is you taking time to figure out what's important to you and how you make progress moving closer to whatever that is. What matters more is what you do with the rest of this year, regardless of whether you set some New Year's resolutions on January 1st or not. And here's what I think is even more important. One of the most powerful ways to move forward is to first look back, not to judge yourself, but to learn from the past year. And so that's what we're going to do today. I want to take you and look at my 2025, what happened, where I started, what I learned, and what I'm taking with me into 2026 so that you can do the same. So let's look back where I was at the beginning of 2025. At the beginning of the year, I knew we had a PCS coming that summer. It was even a little more nerve-wracking because of the talk about overhauling the household goods movement and the proposed transition to HomeSafe Alliance, which was not going smoothly and ultimately fell apart at the beginning of the summer. But we were thinking about our upcoming PCS. My youngest had broken her leg in December, which meant that she could no longer ride the bus to school. She had a wheelchair, and I had to daily drive her to school and pick her up and take her to extra medical appointments, which was at least an extra hour or more of my days. So in January, I did something that I had never done before. In almost 4 years, I took a break from the podcast. Since 2021, I had released weekly episodes almost without fail because I really wanted military spouses, and I believe that they deserved a consistent weekly podcast. And when I went about starting the podcast, nothing like that existed. But podcasting is a lot of work, which is why that probably didn't exist. And I knew for me personally, something had to give. And I thought at the time, if I give myself a few weeks break, then I will be refreshed, renewed, and ready to come back to delivering weekly content for the podcast as we are planning our move. Only that break didn't last a few weeks. It lasted 4 months. And then we PCS'd. And life kept happening. And while I delivered content on the podcast in 2025, I never really got back to that weekly consistency. And so I want to share with you today kind of why that happened, what I learned through that, and what I'm taking with us into 2026. Now, a few years ago, if I had skipped a few weeks of the podcast, this really would have bothered me because I heard constantly that consistency is the most important thing. And yes, consistency matters. If you are not consistent, if you do not learn to be consistent, then you're probably not going to stick with whatever that thing is. You're probably not going to make as much progress. You're probably not going to grow in that area in the same way. But I had already demonstrated consistency. So it wasn't consistency that I was trying to learn. For me in 2025, it was learning how to reevaluate my priorities for different seasons of life. And in 2025, I had to make choices. And I chose for the first time to not make the podcast one of my top priorities. I chose to start and complete a coaching certification. I chose to prioritize finishing the second draft of my book. I chose to prioritize doing some stuff for our family and getting some of the projects that had been on my to-do list for years and finally getting those to the finish line. I chose to try to make this PCS as smooth a PCS as possible. And the reality was I could not choose all of those things and show up weekly on the podcast. That wasn't failure, even though I wasn't consistent as I wanted to be. That was essentialism. Essentialism says I can do anything, but I cannot do everything and do it well. And so for me, 2025 was really about reprioritizing how I spent my time. So when I look back at 2025, I look at the goals I set for myself at the beginning of the year and then what actually happened. I set goals for myself in 2025 to, number 1, find a publisher or agent for my book. Number 2, hit a specific health goal. Number 3, work on my personal growth. And number 4, to find a coaching certification that I intended to pursue in 2026. So that was my goal. And then the year started and it didn't pan out exactly like I anticipated. I didn't find a publisher or an agent yet. I didn't hit that health goal. If anything, I got farther from it. But I did find and complete a coaching certification in 2025. And I did finish the second draft of my book. And I did more personal inner work on myself than I ever expected. So when I go back and look at what I intended, my intentions for 2025, and what actually happened, on paper, I didn't hit all my goals. But the reality of the situation is that I actually grew. And so I want to take a few minutes to share with you some of the lessons that 2025 taught me that I'm carrying forward into 2026. There are 6 lessons that I'm carrying with me that I want to share with you. The first is that progress matters so much more than attainment. It's easy to look at something and say, did I hit this goal? Did I accomplish that goal? And the answer might be yes, or the answer might be no. And when we just judge it by the outcome, we can often find ourselves feeling disappointed. But what matters so much more is whether we made progress. When I shift my question from did I accomplish this goal to did I make progress in the direction I'm headed, the answer is yes. In all of the things I was prioritizing this year, I made progress on. And progress is what matters because progress is what will actually lead us to where we're trying to go. If we just focus on the outcomes and we don't hit the outcome we were after, or we don't hit that outcome within the time frame that we set for ourselves, we're more likely to give up and never get where we're trying to go. But if we keep our focus on progress, we will keep going and we will eventually get where we're trying to go or where we need to be in the long run. So progress matters so much more than attainment. Number 2, challenging seasons build capacity, even when we don't feel strong. Because sometimes we feel like this is hard. I feel like I'm not doing a great job of this. But every time that we're walking through a difficult season, we have the opportunity to learn from it, to grow from it, to expand our capacity to handle those difficult moments that life requires of us. PCSing 3 years in a row thus far is teaching me about what's possible for me and what I can commit to while we're PCSing. This last summer, I was in the middle of my coaching certification program and I was trying to get a certain number of coaching hours while we're in the middle of our move, which involved us being without a house for about a month and trying to figure out how do you schedule and find time to coach people when you're living on the road, when you're in a temporary lodging facility, when you're trying to move and trying to balance all of these things. It feels like a lot because it is, but because the more that I do that, the more I build the capacity to handle stressful seasons of life. So even when it feels overwhelming or you don't feel like you're showing up, every challenging situation is an opportunity to learn and grow from if you let it. Number 3, we all have a lot more limiting beliefs than we realize. I started this coaching certification program this year with the intention that I was going to help coach other people. But what it really was a chance to do a lot of self-reflection and see that even though I've done a lot of work on myself over the years and I've learned a lot of tools and resources that have helped me change my mindset, change my outlook on life, change the habit patterns that I engage in, I still have a lot of thought patterns and limiting beliefs that hold me back. And so I learned a lot about those unconscious thought patterns that were holding me back and how to process them, how to bring them to my awareness so that I could actually begin to reframe those beliefs. So all of us have a lot more limiting beliefs than we are even aware of. And when we take that time to start noticing our thought processes, it's amazing what we'll learn about ourselves and what's possible and what we're capable of. Number 4, taking the time to work on my own personal growth and taking the time to write, especially a whole book, is really rewarding, and it's also mentally taxing. It takes a lot of time and energy to kind of think through everything you want to say, to be able to carve out the time to do that. And I'm so glad that I was able to prioritize that this year. But it did take a lot of time and energy. And so I'm really glad that I did that. And I'm glad that I finished the draft and I can now move on to pursuing that next step and moving towards publication. The 5th big lesson I learned this year was that you can't make PCSing take less time. Let me unpack this for a moment because I have gotten to this point where I am in my 8th house in 10 years. I've had 7 PCSs. We're PCSing this summer. And I was like, how do I condense the amount of time and energy and effort it takes to move? Because this has basically become my hobby for the last several years. And I was like, there's only so much you can do to shortcut this process because it just takes time. It takes time to figure out where you're going to live, depending on where you're going and what the available options look like. It takes time to sort through your stuff to figure out what is going with you, what you need to purge. It takes time to get established in your new place, to build relationships, to find the doctors and the dentists and all of the providers and just build your community from scratch. So as much as I have done my best to try to condense that process so that it doesn't take over my life, it just takes time. And I just have to be okay with how much time it's going to take in a year that is a PCS year. So there's only so much I can do to condense that time. But the last thing that I'm really taking from 2025 and the lesson that I'm bringing into 2026 is the most important part of this whole journey is about not giving up. It is so easy to feel frustrated and to know that you're not making the progress that you want to make in the time that you want to make it, and to feel discouraged by that, to let those negative thoughts tell you that it's not worth it and that you should just give up and stop trying. But every time I felt tempted to quit, I came back to this question: what's possible in this season? And where am I trying to go? And the more that I keep that future focus and I think about what's possible in this season, what's possible this month, what's possible this week, what's possible today, and how can I be intentional with the time I have today, then I keep making progress. I keep moving forward, even when it feels like I'm not making much progress. Let me give you a really practical example of this. So in 2024, towards the end of 2024, is when I first was like, okay, it is time to make my health a priority. It is hard when you move a lot, and I really want to be able to become the healthiest version of myself that I can. And so at the end of 2024, I started prioritizing my macros. I started lifting weights. I started trying to do what I could to make my health a priority. And I did really well for several months. But as it came time to PCS, and I no longer had access to my weights, and we were living on the road, and we did not have access to the same way to prepare food. And then as we got into our new house, which did not have a basement, and I had gotten into a really great rhythm of working out in our basement before I had to help the kids get out the door for school in the morning. And so here we are in a house without a basement, without a way for me to work out in the house. The kids are going to school much earlier. The healthy snacks that I have found at our last duty station are no longer available. And it's just one thing after another of all the habits and rhythms to support my health that I had found were no longer available to me, and I had to pivot. And that was really frustrating because I felt like I had taken all of the time to build these habits and build that consistency to prioritize my physical health. And then all of the things that I found that worked for me were taken away, and I had to build that from scratch, and it just wasn't working. I didn't have the space, I didn't have the time, I didn't have the resources that I had before. And so there was several times where I was tempted to give up, and I kept trying, and the closer it got to December, the less motivation I had. And so I had to stop and say, okay, what is possible for me in this season, not in 6 months when we move again, but in this season, what is possible for me, and what can I prioritize, and how can I still move toward this goal, even though in some ways I feel like I'm farther from it than I was a year ago. But as much as I have been tempted to want to give up, I keep going back to what matters most is not giving up, is saying what's possible for me in this season, and what can I do to align myself with the future version of myself that I want to be. Even when it's hard, even when there's obstacles in the way, even when I feel like I'm not making as much progress as I would like to be. So I hope that some of these lessons that have really helped me in 2025 are helpful to you as well. I would also love for you to have a framework for yourself to help you reflect on what you learned in 2025 and how you want to take that into this new year. So if you want to do your own evaluation of your year, here's a very simple process you can do in 15 to 20 minutes. Ask yourself these 4 questions. Number 1, what actually happened last year? Just make a list of what happened. No judgment with that. Sometimes it's easy if you look through your camera roll, or if you kept a calendar, look through your calendar of what actually happened. Just jot down some notes about what happened last year. Then think about what went well, even if it wasn't big, even if it wasn't flashy, even if it wasn't what most people would deem successful. What went well for you in 2025? And then what didn't go as planned and why? Now, I say that because I don't want you to blame yourself for what happened. This is just about noticing patterns, not feeling shame or guilt or anything else. What did not go as planned and why? And what can you learn from that? What did last year teach you about yourself, about your energy, about your capacity, about what you need, about your priorities? And then ask yourself one final question. What do I want to carry forward into 2026? What are the lessons that you learned that you want to take with you into 2026? Maybe as you reflect on 2025, you realize that you didn't do a great job of taking care of your physical health or your mental health. Maybe you realize that you developed deep friendships for the first time in 2025, and you need those, and you want to carry those with you into 2026. And now you know how important having a close friend is to your ability to navigate life well. What is it that you can take from 2025 and learn from as you move into 2026? Now, for me, I'm a big fan of having a word of the year that kind of guides my decision making as I navigate the year. So what I like to do as I reflect on everything that I have experienced and learned and grown from in the previous year, I look for those patterns and themes and then say, okay, what about this helps me grow? And what word or phrase do I want to take with me? How do I want to feel in the new year? And what word or phrase encapsulates how I want to grow in the new year? So for me, in 2025, my word was energy. In 2026, my word is presence, because presence protects that energy. It helps me remember what actually matters and helps me show up fully where I'm at. So I would encourage you, as you think about what you learned in 2025, the lessons that you want to take with you into 2026, to then say, is there a word or phrase that encapsulates how I want to grow this year? So that is my invitation to you to, number one, just tell you what happened in 2025, how it didn't go like I planned, but how I learned a lot through that process and how I'm choosing to grow in 2026. Now, am I going to release weekly episodes every week in 2026? That is still to be determined, because I would like to, but I also am learning to prioritize my time differently based on each season. And I know I have another PCS coming up. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but I do know that I am giving myself the flexibility to say the podcast matters, showing up for you and me, and for building a community of military spouses who want to make the most of the life they have matters. And we're going to do what we can do, and then just be okay with the fact that the most important thing is not giving up. Now, this is also kind of crazy because in 2026, we're going to celebrate 5 years of the More Than a Milspouse podcast. And if you had asked me 5 years ago if I was going to be podcasting, the idea of podcasting for 5 straight years was kind of mind-blowing at the time. But here we are. This is the year we celebrate 5 years of the podcast. And I am so grateful for you and for the community that we have built. And if you have shared this podcast with anyone in your life, if you reached out to me, if you've sent me a message, if you've left us a review, thank you for being a part of this community. Thank you for being a voice, and thank you for being on this journey with me. Here's what I want to leave you with today. If 2025 did not look the way that you hoped, you're not behind. You're learning, and what's possible next isn't determined by what you did or didn't do, but by what you choose to do now. Whether you set a resolution on January 1st and you have already hit Quitter's Day, or whether you haven't even given a thought to how you want life to change in the days and months ahead, that's okay. I am so glad that you're here, and I'm excited for what we are building together in 2026. I can't wait to be back with you again soon. Until next time, may you live filled, fueled, and full of joy. Hey, Amazing Milspouse, before you go, I want you to know that I love hearing from you. The More Than a Milspouse community exists to help you thrive as a military spouse. Figure out what lights your heart on fire and empower you to live with purpose and impact. You can have an incredible impact simply by heading over to iTunes to subscribe and leave a review. But your impact doesn't stop there. You can empower those around you simply by sharing an episode with a friend or neighbor, someone who needs a little encouragement in this military life. And if this episode was meaningful to you, spread the love by taking a screenshot of this episode and tagging me on Instagram so we can continue to reach more people, change more lives, and shift the way that military spouses look at life. Because we are better together, and together we can change the world. Let's do it.